But as we laugh la phakathi enhlizweni yami kubhlungu kakhulu. This is a week eseremindwe ukuthi South Africa ithengisiwe. And okubhlungu sikhunjuzwa ke manje ukuthi ke na futhi siyaboniswa ke manje ukuthi iSouth Africa izodayiswa sibhekile singezukusho lutho futhi. Ngibuza ukuthi uminister nje behleli lapha insizwa yakithi uthini ngesibongo sakhe. Uthini ngomndeni wakhe uyacabangela ukuthi kusasa this will go in the history ukuthi ungomunye wabadayisi and udayisa ngesilungu. Udayisa in a very urban way other than before ngale nkathi abantu besadayisa ubefaka itayere eshiswa. Kubhlungu ukuthi sibukele iSouth Africa ehleli no Trump edelela umongameli wezwe who is supposed to be representing us. But ehluleke. I'm sorry, I'm not going to sugarcoat this one. And I plead with you, Chair, ukuthi ngathi ngasinika isikhathi. Because this is not about the policy or this gazette kuphela. This in total is ukuthathwa kwezwe. Because this Starlink issue has a lot in it. It has cyber security enkulu kabi la ekuthenini uthathe izwe lethu futhi lichiqilele phansi. Isimilo Chair kuminister yasibuza ukuthi uvuma kanjani ukuthi kuxoxwe phambi kwakhe ukuthi akususwe i30% efike kanzima Chair. Yabona kuze Chair kufike ku30% it was when abantu abamnyama in business bengakhona ukufinyelela bathola amathuba. They will be told that their companies are not well experienced, they don't have those services, they don't qualify for certain grades. Kwaphuma isinqumo under uPresident Zuma clear in the constitution ukuthi these laws are made to develop umuntu omnyama nokuthi skills sisale la South Africa baphinde bawuthola umsebenzi as business people. Sifika kanjani ukuthi insizwa yakithi emnyama ihlale nabanye ivuma ukuthi cha umuntu omnyama akanganikwa lento akungena icompany yangaphandle ingavunyelwa ivumelwe ukuthi ingalandeli imigomo yeGNU yelokhonja ye South Africa but ilandele yeGNU. In the midst of my question, Honorable Colin Makubela, comes the act engiboniswa Honorable Usupulana. Ezoti ubuza a question ukuthi leader yabo. Leader yabo Chair in the Oval Office are there deals cut behind the scene. And we are sitting here Chair, we are calling ourselves or you are calling yourselves into a GNU. Where is the GNU lapo? Because we're supposed to be collectively deciding this thing not as GNU. You are one in this thing. Chair, it cannot be umkhonto wesizwe saphila ukuthi abantu abamnyama bazodayiswa izwe labo sibhekile. Kunendoda lapha Chair eyagwazwa, if I may check on my phone, I just forgot the name. Emmanuel Sithole. Wagwazwa ngesikhathi seZenefova attacks Chair. Kulwela ukuthi sithi ama-foreigners athatha imisebenzi yabantu eSouth Africa. Yet makufika umlungu othi scraphani lama BEE rules asimbone as a foreigner. Sithi asike hlale phansi the whole minister uyagazetha. Isikhathi sokuthi bafika ama company asikhandele ama boreholes aspendele amaklasi siphelile manje as skills development. Ngiyafuna nje ukuthi siyibhekisise lento ukuthi alingadayiswa izwe lethu sibhekile. And minister lobu angazi mina ngizobiza straight ubugebengu lento yenzayo ukuthi uzogazetha lento engekho emthethweni. Ukuthi kuze kusuke nje kunela belungu. I'm going to ask you a question as straightforward kuwe Minister. Ngiyambona uminister uhlele emva kwakho ngoba wena ngiyabonda wena uminister nangu minister la emva kwakho. Cela ungibuzele ke ungitranslate indlela engithukuthekele ngayo isilungu siphuma siyala. Cela ungibuzele kuminister emva kwakho. Ukuthi njengoba kuthumile uyazi ukuthi iBEE lo 30% wakhandelwane. You see Chair, umkhonto wesizwe says we must change this Roman Dutch law. This is one of the reasons we want to change this constitution because it opens ama loopholes amaningi Chair. For one lapha ku9 it says there's a or there that opens this door to this thing ukuthi bangene bavulele Starlink la. You go to Land Expropriation Act Chair. It says nil compensation where it should be saying zero compensation. That's the reason why we must change this constitution because this constitution it designed kahle yabenza lobugebengu lapha phakathi ukuthi uma kufika isikhathi esiso ixoze liso masilifaka solifaka lisivulela umnyango la. So Chair, we may sugarcoat this thing and think ukuthi sikhuluma ngegazette. No, sikhuluma nge-Starlink ekumele singeniswe sizoganga la eSouth Africa esingafuni ukuhlonipha imithetho yaSouth Africa. Uyangixaka mina uminister ukuthi ufika kanjani ethatheni decision yokuthi akudelele iSouth Africa phambi kwakhe. Uthini ngomndeni wakhe? Uthini ngesibongo sakhe? Sikhula nje kwakuthiwe emaphoyiseni mawuzosebenza bakubuza ukuthi uzokwazi ukubopha uma wakho mayegangile. Uzokwazi ngizubheke former minister ubheke icele ethi ubuziwe ukuthi yazini uma ngingambopha uZuma zobopha nini. I feel this is the same situation where uminister kutshela ukuthi uma ungakwenzi lokho uzolamba umndeni wakho. Minister, are you serving South Africans or are you saving umndeni wakho? If you are saving South Africans, do you feel ukuthi lento right for South Africa? Ukuthi scrap kungadevelop abantu abamnyama 30% usuke khona lapho? Ayo kahle insizwa ke abuye nganene. Ngiyabonga.
My concern is that it seems like the minister is trying to amend legislation using a ministerial policy directive. And I'll tell you why. Because you use the word alignment, and I think you do it deliberately instead of amendment. So I think you're trying to effect amendments using a ministerial policy directive to the Electronic Communications Act as well as to the ICT sector code, which is a product of the PPPE Act. Because in your policy directive communication, you say that you seek to align the two. I'm interested as to what would the consequence of that alignment look like? How do you achieve alignment outside of changing legislation? Because the ICT sector code, as much as it might be a regulatory instrument under the Department of Communications, it's a product of the PPPE Act. And to give a ministerial directive on the ICT sector code, which belongs to that specific act, which is regulated by the Department of Trade and Industry, confuses me. On the Electronic Communications Act, which speaks to the 30% ownership as well, I would imagine that an amendment of that or an alignment of that with the ICT sector code would require some level of amendment to either both pieces of legislation or one. One doesn't belong to the Department of Communications. It's a product of an act of the Department of Trade and Industry. The other is an act of Parliament. When you want to achieve this alignment, how do you seek to achieve it using a ministerial policy directive? And I think that speaks to the overstepping of powers or overstepping of executive powers that has been spoken to in the House. That is my primary legislative concern. But also conversely, I mean, we're talking about Starlink here. I don't think we should tiptoe around it. We're talking about Starlink. There might be many other foreign satellite companies that have interest in operating in South Africa, but there's a specific interest in Starlink, and I think Sipho will speak to the political context about that as well. But I'm interested in, has there any been consideration of the impact the introduction of foreign satellite companies operating in South Africa would have on the local telecommunications industry, specifically as it relates to jobs? Because there's a myth going around here that the introduction of Starlink will achieve two things, that it will achieve rural access to internet connectivity and as well will increase jobs. How will a satellite that will operate and be ran remotely from another country impact on the local telecommunications sector's jobs? And considering especially the high unemployment rate in this country. But secondly, what is the knowledge of the department on the costs related to the introduction of foreign satellite operators? Will it necessarily bring higher connectivity levels to rural communities? Will it be cheaper? Comparative to what? And has there been any consideration of the other spheres within which Starlink operates and the regulatory frameworks in the other countries that they operate in, whether they abided by them as set in stone? Because we're aware that they are operating in India with much stricter ownership regulatory existence in terms of local ownership there. We know there's been a challenge in Taiwan, in Japan. Why are we altering our legislation for Starlink, whereas where it goes to operate in other countries, it did not utilize this coercion for us to change our laws in order for it to operate in South Africa? So I'm interested in the legislative aspect of it, and I think we'll talk further after we get clarity on that. Thank you, Chair.
Good morning, Chairperson and colleagues. Good morning, Minister. Minister, does it not bother you that this will lead to endless legal battles? Because I can assure you that as the EFF, we are going to challenge this unconstitutional proposal, not only in Parliament, but we'll make sure that we explore all legal mechanisms, because we are not about to accept a situation where our laws are rewritten in Washington. I'm wondering, Minister, if it really does not bother you that you you are setting a wrong precedence of bending backwards when you are being bullied. Because we can't, like we've said with my colleagues, that this is about Starlink. This is about Washington. So now we have a bunch of bullies bullying you, and you are bending backwards for them. And then you make it seem like this has been in process. I don't think this has been in process, because I think if that was the case, this committee would be aware that this has been in process. But like my colleagues have been saying, that this is an issue we heard about in the media. I'm wondering if maybe it doesn't bother you that you're making us look weak, that when racists are throwing toys, right, and are hating on black people in our country, and you are giving them what they want. Because this started when the government of this country signed an act, the Land Expropriation Act, into a bill, and they started spreading these lies and disinformation about us. So clearly these are people who hate the laws of this country. Why would a billionaire have a problem of 30% black ownership? This is a billionaire who is not belonging in this country and doesn't want people of this country to own anything. Does it not bother you that you are taking people who hate black people and you want them to operate in this country and they're not even contributing anything? There are not going to be jobs that are created here. They don't want ownership of black people. They don't want black people to own land. They don't want black people to own anything. These are the people who see the majority of the people in this country as nothing. And it doesn't bother you that these are the people you want to operate in this country for free. There are many things that we can prioritize, Minister. There is an issue that could be of priority, which is the full digital migration, which is supposed to assist in to assist and boost the digital access. And those are the issues that you're not looking at. There are issues that we can prioritize instead of favoring foreign countries. Talking to ICASA to have a conversation and force big telecoms like Vodacom and MTN to ensure that they improve connectivity and they lower data. But those are the things that we are not doing. You are making us look incompetent. You are making us look like we don't know what we are doing because you are favoring racists. These are people who are racists. We can't allow them in this country. As the EFF, we reject anything that has got to do with Starlink. We're saying we know what should be done. We should prioritize what should be done, and then we must just do that what needs to be done, and not allow our laws to be rewritten in Washington. Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Honorable Ndlela speaks about the discovery that Starlink is operating in the country illegally. Any company that operates in the country through other backward channels, illegal ways, I think the laws of the, in fact, not I think, it must be a must that the laws of the country must be upheld. It must be. Regardless whether they are Malazi satellites or Ndlela satellites or whoever, there must be. And I think the question that you're asking is they are operating under our nose. Personally, I didn't know about that discovery that we have made. And in all fairness, I think we'll engage with the regulator to be able to set the right course of action going forward. And then there was, there's a lot. Yeah, the other sentiment in here, which I don't want to spend a lot of time around. Of course, there is a lot of audience exhibitioning that is taking place. And that seems to say that you've got a minister who belongs to the Democratic Alliance, who somewhere has a conspiracy to make special dispensation for any interested businesses to operate in our country. Nothing could be further from the truth. And someone asked, am I being bullied? No, I'm not being bullied. I don't take kindly to bullies. And I would not allow myself to be bullied. And then we'll move to the Honorable Makhubele. The Honorable Makhubele had 4 questions. Why should we keep you? Unfortunately, being kept in here is beyond your control. And I'm not being rude, because ministers serve at the pleasure of the president through the formation of the government of national unity. And when are you reversing the Gazette? I think it's important to give the stage of the public comments the rightful place that it enjoys in the process, and let be guided by what the public submissions are saying to that. Who pressured you? Nobody pressured me, as I said. And I underscore that point because the events that predated this week are important to take into consideration if we're going to deal fairly and substantively with the issue at play. What I do pick up, though, which is a genuine concern of the members of the committee and some of the sentiment of the public, it is saying, why that week, right? And I make the point that depending on what conclusion you want to get to, you'll get any argument that suits that. I made the point earlier that when we communicated on the policy directive, the timeline we were aiming and working with was to finalize the policy direction process by mid-June. We are now in May, and we've gazetted that in the 3rd week of May to allow that process to go through. And I appreciate the fact that some members may view that development and conclude whatever they want to conclude. But it is the following of a due process that has been taking place for some time. Honorable Makhubele, I believe that I'm capable of doing this job. I'm not contemplating any attempt whatsoever to resign. And just for clarity, I don't take the comments made by Honorable Shongwe to be an ad hominem attack whatsoever. And I think I'm advantaged by the fact that we've had prior engagements. In fact, this is the least heated engagement we've had with the portfolio, given how other meetings have gone by. I think there is a passion and there is a deep-rooted concern about 2 things, which also link to what the chairperson said. Regulation parity, same rules for the same players, right? And when we say that if you consider that you would then have the option of the path of the equity equivalence or sticking to pursuing the 30% ownership, that choice lies upon whoever wants to enter the market. It is a choice that is embedded. It is embedded in the legislation. And it was enacted, colleagues, by the founder of one party in this house that Honorable Shong and Honorable Makhubele represents. So we're not trying to act outside the prescripts of what the law of empowerment says. And there's also this attempt to say, does this have government buy-in? B is a policy of government. It is there. And we're trying to give life to the full spirit of that, so that we don't face an instance where, due to different interpretations, due to different lobbying and considerations, we think that there is a gap, and that gap can be sustained. Because one of the key elements of having, and the committee has been passionate about this, around the issue of policy certainty, is asking all the duality that exists in the interpretation of the policy. I think it was either Honorable Mhaha, but also 2 other colleagues prior to you mentioned in terms of the question that infers that is one undermining ICASA. No, none at all. And that's why the process says, and the regulator can confirm in this, and Chair, it also touches your point in terms of the phrasing and the directive. And the use of the direct is, you could say the language could be better, but it is founded upon which section makes provision for policy directive to be issued. In the end, when the submissions from the public are being considered, they will influence the final formulation of that policy. And then it will state, right, and I try not to get into the permutations, because the risk of getting into the permutations may give the incorrect impression that there is a foregone conclusion to an ongoing process. And there isn't a foregone conclusion to an ongoing process, because it reconciles with the point that some members consistently say, that why not do, and I think it was Honorable Tambo, and apologies if I'm incorrectly associating you with an idea that wasn't yours, why not amend the ECA? Because it will then deal with these issues of mandate overstep and all of that. And I'm saying, colleagues, I am not stuck to what the draft policy is articulating in terms of what it seeks to achieve, because I do not know what the submissions will be. because there are going to be submissions that may encapsulate some of the views that have been expressed here, some of which have been expressed in the media, and those will then be additional. But what I do know, which we've got a constitutional responsibility to do, is that we must consider those comments, and those comments must be considered properly in informing the final policy direction. And then ultimately, which is why I think there is a fear that in the final formulation of the policy somehow, you would have indirectly placed undue pressure on the regulator to take a particular position on this matter. It is actually the elephant in the room that is not being asked. And I'm doing that deliberately to say that is not the case. Because the regulator has a responsibility to ensure that it does its job regardless of the size of the noise or what is being codified as an expression. I make the point, which I think Honorable Subrathi or Honorable Matafa was warning against, to say that, I can't say that the authority can't stop the minister. The point I was making, clarifying in that, is that in terms of the process, the authority can express its view. And you have to interrogate that view and be satisfied that does it sufficiently ask the questions one is seeking to resolve with the draft policy or not. And I'm properly empowered to make a determination as to it does that adequately or not. And when I believe that isn't the case, we go to the stage of gazetting, and then we go to the stage of considering the public comment. I've got trust in the public participation process to be able to be able to express the sentiment of both parliamentarians, both parties, both players in the sector, and the public. We are a representative democracy here, and that input has to be taken into consideration. And I would say to colleagues, whether you believe that the step of the policy direction would be one that you would have preferred or you would have taken, there is a public process that is going to unfold to that. Let that process also take its course, and let us measure what the input says in there. Somebody spoke about the risk of litigation. In the interest of openness, and I'm never one to duck and dive questions, it is possible, because any other party that has a divergent view on a policy initiative can feel that the true test of that would be a litigation. But I also believe that the ultimate test of leadership is also being able to lead in a manner that considered all of the options that are at place and making decisions having considered all of that. And I believe that this avenue of the policy directive is legally sound in its substance and its process. And that I further believe that the final submission of the comments will be considered, as they should, in determining the final policy, direction, and most importantly, the shape and the manner in which it looks. Chair, the last point, and I hope this does not degenerate the conversation, but I think it's important because there are some dots being connected. I can't dissociate myself from the fact that the leader of my party was part of the delegation to the US. And I'm a proud member of my party. I'm not apologetic about that. And I belong to a party that is part of this administration. And this administration, through the president and the other members that were in that delegation, have consistently said there was no discussion whatsoever about Starlink. There wasn't. Some of you have shared this sentiment in there. So as to why you would want to implicate me into conversations I wasn't part of in order to shape a narrative of bullying, I don't know what that seeks to achieve, because each and every opportunity, that idea has been squashed by facts. And that's what must lead our conversations, Chair. And that's what I've got a very long appetite for in terms of the engagement. I know that the portfolio committee would, as it should, at any given time where they feel that the minister needs to take us into confidence. Whether we ultimately agree or not is not important. What is important is that the committee wants to have a sense that they've been taken into confidence about what is happening in their space, and that it's fulfilling its responsibility of oversight, and that we account. Whether it is at short notice or what, we must do that. Because it is important that when conversations of this nature, and I appreciate the fact that this is not just, the nature of this conversation is a matter of national importance. And that is why we also have a full complement of attendance from the portfolio committee, right? Because it speaks to that importance of the issue. And those conversations must be had. And as uncomfortable as it may seem to others, we'll always come here and account fully and take responsibility for the actions and the initiatives that we initiated, because we believe they are sound. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Honourable Minister. There's a lot of stuff, Honourable Members, you don't have to raise it. I've noted everything everybody has said. There's a lot of stuff that's not answered. But Minister, I'm going to press you on one thing, because you underscored it and you said it was important. I think it was Honorable Mkhaha who asked you, did you consult ICASA, and if so, what did ICASA say? Because as you've said, that is the big issue, because we're also worried about the influence that you are seeking to exert on ICASA. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. When we engaged with ICASA, and their written submission to us, which I'm sure at the dictates of the process it will be shared. Their conclusion was they prefer the option of an amendment of the ECA, and did not rule out that the minister can pursue the angle of the policy directive. They expressed what they would prefer. Thank you.
Okay, honorable members, I think we must wrap this issue up. As always, you are free to write to the minister. Minister, please respond to our letters. You are free to write to the minister if there's issues that you want to take up, if this matter must come back again. Minister, I want to underscore one thing to you. This portfolio committee has been kicking, screaming, saying to you, the legislation is outdated, the policy environment is outdated, the regulations are outdated. You've come to us with a 5-year plan that in the first year does not even look at amending legislation. You're going to be planning to do this. We would not have this problem. What you were supposed to do was to update and bring the ECA, amend it in Parliament. You were supposed to do a policy and regulatory environment overhaul. And I'm saying that now we are chasing our tails, running around. And we were promised that by the end of May, today is the 28th, I asked in the House, when are we getting the audio and audiovisual policy? The DG said there, straight face, she said end of May. You are going to circumvent, cut corners now because you don't have a policy, and then we're going to have to sit here again. You know, and I think that those are really part of the challenges that you're facing. I'm not going to rule from the chair that members are saying withdraw, others are saying give it the 30 days, others are saying 90 days. Yeah, you didn't put a date, Honorable Makubela, on resignation. I'm not going to rule on those things. I think all of us were expressing our opinions. I do think that where there are areas where there are legal disagreements, which I think are at the core of this, with the principle in particular, the fact that you cannot use regulations to amend a law or to align to any law. And unfortunately, we didn't get a substantive answer to that question. But be that as it may, we do thank you. And I'm sure I'm not going to give ICASA an opportunity to speak. They, like other members of the public, may make their comments. I would just be very keen to find out what would happen if ICASA continues to express their view that they do not agree with you and have a preference of the other route.